Guys, Books and Gossip here. Hope everyone's doing well. Looking forward to the long weekend. This video is going to be about a confirmed matchup between Chris Eubank Jr. and Tommy Langford. I'm going to touch on two themes in this video. One of them is about setting expectations. The second one is about the British title. So we're going to start with setting expectations, and the 2 points do relate. For many years, I have worked in what I would describe as high value sales. And the reason I call it high value sales is because I've been involved in selling products with a financial value, often in the 5 figures, sometimes in the 6 figures. And when you're working in sales, setting expectations is one of the key things in terms of getting a deal through. And I think this is particularly relevant because Chris Eubank Sr. is essentially a self-appointed salesman on behalf of Chris Eubank Jr.'s career. In fact, Chris Eubank Sr. is actually the manager for Chris Eubank Jr., or certainly acts as the manager, even if Ronnie Davis is technically his manager. So, in a sense, Chris Eubank Jr. Senior, is in charge of selling Junior, selling him to promoters, selling his services, selling his appearances in order to extract a fight fee for Junior. And to be honest, the way that Chris Eubank Senior has operated in terms of hyping his fighter and in terms of trying to generate interest about him, both from promoters as well as the general public, more resembles a salesperson than most other managers operating within the sport. Now, I think the problem for Chris Eubank Sr. is one thing that, in my opinion, he has failed to do in terms of his sales approach is to set expectations. And one person who he is forgetting, or one group of people who he's forgetting about in terms of his sale approach, seem to be the general boxing public. The people who are going to fund his son's career in terms of ticket sales, the people who are going to fund his son's career in terms of pay-per-view sales in future, potentially. Constantly, we have seen Chris Eubank Sr. talk up the big fights, talk up the Billy Joe Saunders rematch, talk up a fight with Gennady Golovkin. And it has been highly questionable whether he's ever actually wanted those fights. We've had Eddie Hearn and Frank Warren actually agreeing on something for once when they're talking about the approach that Chris Eubank Sr. adopts in these deals. It's kind of become apparent that both the Billy Joe Saunders fight and the Golovkin fight were readily available to Chris Eubank at very, very good values in terms of the fee involved. Yet he's turned those down. I've talked about setting expectations before when I've talked about Hughie Fury and how Peter Fury's constantly talked about top 10 opponents, but we've seen Hughie in with more the journeyman type. But here we have the Eubanks taking it to a different level altogether. He's been talking Gennady Golovkin, who's up here, Billy Joe Saunders, who's there, and then he's fighting Tommy Langford, who's somewhere, well, down that way, let's put it that way. In between Billy Joe Saunders and Tommy Langford, you've got a vast gap of fighters. You've got your Peter Quillens, your Danny Jacobs, even other names like Hassan Ndam, Curtis Stevens. There's levels to this. But what we have with Chris Eubank Sr. is talking Golovkin, Billy Joe Saunders, and what we have in reality is Tommy Langford. And for me, it is one of the worst ways of setting expectations. Imagine if you worked in used car sales and a client called up and said, I'm looking to buy a car. I'm thinking something similar to a Ferrari or a Lamborghini or an Aston Martin. And you look out to your forecourt and you have a 20-year-old Renault Clio and a 40-year-old Ford Escort. You could get the client to come to visit by saying, yeah, I think I've got something that may be of interest to you. But really, why would you do that? Because you're wasting that client's time and you're ruining the opportunity for them to do future business with you. If you were an estate agent and someone rang up and said, I'm looking to buy an 8-bedroom house in Chelsea, and you actually had a, I don't know, studio flat in, let's try not to offend anyone, somewhere less desirable, let's put it that way, it would be, again, the wrong approach to waste that client's time. What Chris Eubank Sr. has done here is got the boxing fans mega excited. Mega excited. He's talked Gennady Golovkin, he's talked Billy Joe Saunders, and this has had the success. Chris Eubank Sr. has achieved the sale to an extent because he has raised his son's profile and the discussion in his son's career off the back of all of these fights and the discussion relating to all of these fights. So it has had some success. But the problem is the product that he has delivered. He's talked the Ferrari fight, he's talked the Lamborghini fight. The product he is delivering is the 40-year-old Ford Escort fight, which is the Tommy Langford fight. You know, if we continue the car analogy, Tommy Langford is the car you've already owned 3 or 4 times, but actually a worse version of it when you're looking for an upgrade. Because we've already seen this Tommy Langford fight before, haven't we? We've already seen Eubanks fight Spike O'Sullivan, Nick Blackwell, Chudinoff. We've seen him against this level of operator. And if anything, those guys are actually above Tommy Langford. So what Chris Eubank Senior has done is raised expectations, he's overpromised, and he's massively under-delivered. In doing that, there has been a positive side effect. He has raised his son's profile. He has created a lot of hype and a lot of discussion around his son's career. But the negative is the lack of interest surrounding this fight. I mean, this fight is, it is a fall from grace. As I understand it, Chris Eubank Senior Jr., the fighter who Chris Eubank Sr. was referring to as the most marketable fighter in UK boxing, will be fighting on a Liam Williams undercard. Let me repeat that. Not an Anthony Joshua undercard, not a David Haye undercard, not a Tyson Fury undercard, but a Liam Williams undercard. The same Liam Williams who recently fought Gary Corcoran in a big fight where there was multiple rows of empty seats visible when the lights came on. Chris Eubank Jr. won't be fighting at London's O2. He won't be fighting at Wembley Stadium. He won't be fighting in Brighton, where he's from. He's going to be fighting in Wales on the undercard of a Liam Williams fight. You know, Tommy Langford, there's nothing wrong with him as a fighter, but he's very basic. This is not a competitive fight. Tommy Langford, it's questionable whether he even has a puncher's chance against Junior. And that's not hating on Tommy Langford, it's just the fact of the matter. And because we've seen this fight 3 or 4 times before, because we've seen Eubank Jr. fight at this level 3 or 4 times before, and we know what he does to this level, and because of the lack of interest in the event and the location and the opponent, genuinely, this fight is not going to sell. This fight is really going to see a decrease in the momentum of Chris Eubank Jr.'s career. A decrease. And what this relates to is setting expectations. If Chris Eubank Sr. had said, we want to have a few more fights, he's still young, he's still green, he still needs to work on a few things before Golovkin, fine, people wouldn't be disappointed. If Chris Eubank Sr. said, look, it's not going to be the best fight in the world, we're building up to it, but we're going to have a massive fight on Sky at London's O2, and we're going to do it free to air, the momentum, the interest would continue. But no, instead he's fighting on Box Nation, which is a channel I like and a channel I support, but a channel that doesn't generate the same interest as Sky, in an arena in Wales, on an undercard, against an opponent that the casual boxing fan hasn't heard of, and against an opponent that even the most hardcore of boxing fans wouldn't pick to beat Eubank. Over-promising and under-delivering. That is what Eubank Sr. has done. And he has failed with a basic rule of sales in his job as junior salesperson to set expectations appropriately. Now, tied into this is the British title. Someone, I can't remember who it was, but someone commented on the podcast the other day, what you guys are failing to realise is that Chris Eubank Jr. Is obviously fighting Tommy Langford because he wants to own the British title outright. Fair enough. But if that was the case, why did Chris Eubank Sr. talk up the Golovkin fight? Because I don't think Golovkin was going to get a fight for the British title, was he? You know, why did they make that decision? If they always intended to win the British title outright, fine. But it relates to setting expectations. They should have set the expectation that was the case. I've got to say also, I like Frank Warren. I like what he's doing on Box Nation. I think he's got a great stable of fighters. If anything, I think Frank Warren's stable of fighters at the more junior level may even be more talented than the Eddie Hearn stable of fighters. And I can see Frank Warren having multiple world champions from his group of young fighters at present. But I'm going to be brutally honest. For a fighter like Eubank, who is a highly marketable fighter, who is on the verge of really crossing over to the casual fans, at this point, Sky Sports is the only place for him to be. Sky Sports, free to air, he'll get a massive audience. Sky Sports pay-per-view, he'll get a massive payday. I've got to be honest. By all means, do a deal with Frank if you're going to get the Billy Joe Saunders rematch. By all means, tidy that up. But if you're not going to get that rematch, and that's far from certain, Billy Joe may well get a fight with Canelo Alvarez, which I believe he would take well above the Chris Eubank Jr. fight. If you're not going to get a fight of that magnitude, I think Sky Sports really is the place for Chris Eubank Jr. at the minute. And I think the platform they have and the viewership they have will be the place for him to take his career to the next level. Fighting in Wales on a Liam Williams undercard as a co-main event against Tommy Langford doesn't get my pulse racing and is a distinct disappointment compared to how our expectations were set when Inglis was in full sales mode. Let me know your thoughts, people. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Am I being harsh? Let me know your take on this situation. If you're new to the channel, please do leave your comments below. Let me know what's going to happen with this guy's career. If you enjoyed this video, I'd really appreciate it if you take the time to hit the thumbs up. If you're new to the channel or you haven't done before, please hit that subscribe button so you can check out my other stuff. Many thanks for watching. Have a good weekend, everyone.